Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 385, Your Victory Over Complacency, Part 2. How transformation reverses the damage of complacency within your mind. The podcast objectives are: reveal how truth is the foundation of reality, analyze why we need a complete picture of the Father's will, and reveal how transformation eliminates complacency. This lesson contains timelines and other visuals. Therefore, if you are listening to the podcast, I advise you to watch the video version on our website or YouTube, or request a PDF of the lesson so you can add the visual effect. Truth and the power to save us. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 169 of our exposition of lawlessness. In the most recent podcast, we began analyzing your victory over complacency by revealing how transformation has the power to bring you into your purpose. Along these lines, we should consider a key aspect of our reception of the Spirit of Elohim. To wit, we should consider where he abides and how he implements the transformation process with the following interest point. When you receive the set-apart Spirit of Elohim, he does not enter your physical body and live inside of you. Quite the contrary, he enters your spirit division and imparts various spiritual gifts into the sensory region of your right brain, i.e., your spiritual mind. Not only this, but he also leaves a portion of his presence, which in time fills your spirit division and connects you to all who are in the assembly of Yahushua Messiah, i.e., the renewed nation of Israel. Now, as it pertains to the Spirit of Elohim, we must appreciate how it is not practical to believe he would permanently reside in every member of the renewed nation of Israel. Furthermore, it is not even necessary, for all we chiefly need is his presence, for this allows him to communicate with us in real spiritual time, i.e., a model of time that transcends our physics, which we may discuss in a future podcast, Yahuwah willing. Not only does this model of time keep us at all times connected to the Father, but it also allows every member in the renewed nation of Israel to be connected to each other via the sensory region of our spiritual mind. You can see this by observing the image to the right. Along these lines, the residing of the Spirit within our right brain gives us an amazing advantage in our quest for holiness. Vis-a-vis, his residence allows us to interpret every manner of spiritual stimuli by the infinite intellect of the Spirit of Elohim. Ergo, it would be impossible for us to knowingly allow any stimuli promoting lawlessness to enter our beings. Now, the key word is knowingly, for our enemies are masters of deception and disguise. This is why Deception is the most prevalent degree of lawlessness, and it is why the agents of darkness are as wolves in sheep's clothing. This is why we must ensure that we are always evaluating spiritual stimuli by the faculties of the Spirit. And we must always give precedence to the Spirit and His spiritual evaluation of stimuli. Here is why. If we give precedence to the physical evaluation of stimuli, we forfeit the faculties of the Spirit of Elohim, to wit, the singular faculty that has the power to save us. Enter the truth. We know this because truth is the foundation of reality. Ergo, where there is no truth, there can be no reality. And if we exist outside of the Father's reality, then rest assured, we also exist outside of His will. And then, how can we be saved? A complete picture of the Father's will. Now, this matter lends itself to a focal aspect of the Spirit residing within our beings. To wit, the 16 primary degrees of holiness are nestled within the truth factory of our sensory region. You can see this by observing the image to the right. Vis-a-vis, the Spirit of truth aligns with our zone of truth in order to lead and guide us into all truth. If you recall, the primary degrees of holiness are not activated when we receive the Spirit of Elohim. Quite the contrary, they are activated when we unlock them by mastering their secondary degrees. Take faith, for example, i.e., the primary degree of holiness we have already covered. Faith is inserted into your truth faculty when you receive the Spirit of Elohim, as are all the other degrees of holiness. Notwithstanding, because faith is the leading degree of holiness, the Spirit will guide us to unlock the power of faith as a priority. For without faith, we have no foundation. We have no prospects of success. Along these lines, the Spirit will instruct us in the ways of hope, trust, and reliance, i.e., the secondary degrees of faith. For we cannot unlock the power of faith if we do not first unlock the power of these three. The same rule is applied to obedience. Like faith in all the primary degrees of holiness, it is made up of three secondary degrees, to wit, the 3 degrees we have analyzed in recent podcasts. Enter compliance, conformance, and transformation. And yet, because obedience is the primary application of faith, we do not experience the full effect of faith until we unlock the power of obedience, and we are obedient in all things. Now, this speaks to the primary illustration of transformation in our quest. Enter a spiritual converter. By definition, a converter is a device that accepts data in one format and converts it to another. Along these lines, transformation as a spiritual converter takes the spiritual data processed by your spiritual thought processes, which is governed by the Spirit of Elohim, and amazingly, it converts that data into physical data within your CPU. My dear friends, hear me carefully as I say, this is one of the most powerful and crucial processes that occurs within your mind. It is also why transformation is the first node of mastery we achieve in our quest for holiness. Here is why. The physical data converted by transformation, which passes into your CPU, overrides any discrepancy in the physical data passed into your CPU from your physical thought processes. Brothers and sisters, I truly hope you are getting this. Vis-a-vis, there is no limit to the power of transformation. Look here. On this occasion, transformation has the power to upgrade your CPU, adding a function to your CPU that it did not prior possess, and for a specific reason. As you have learned, every illustration of holiness is a safeguard the Spirit employs to empower you to reign over the degree of lawlessness you have just defeated. And as it pertains to transformation, your spiritual converter has the power to override your physical thought processes. Now, it is true that your physical thought processes are now being governed by trust, i.e., the focal degree of faith. But that doesn't mean that you will operate in the spirit of trust 100% of the time. Even if you operate in the spirit of trust 99% of the time, brothers and sisters, there is still that 1% that could ruin everything for you. And trust me, all Satan needs is that 1%. And he is watching you to see if you are going to give him that 1%. Yet, have no fear, for transformation is here. Vis-a-vis, if there is any corruption stemming from your physical thought processes, your CPU, which was formerly agnostic to the data it received, will now begin vetting all the data it receives via your spiritual converter. Not only this, but transformation offers additional upgrades to your CPU. Vis-a-vis, even if the data passed into your CPU from your physical thought processes is accurate and 100% aligned with the spirit of trust, transformation still has the power to augment the data, providing a more complete picture of the Father's will, which makes it even easier to walk in the spirit of trust. This is precisely why the spirit division, being amplified by the spirit of Elohim, must always take precedence over the remaining divisions of your body. And remember, it's not always about preventing spiritual death. As in the occasion of transformation and trust, it's about enhancing your spiritual growth. It's about obtaining a more complete picture of the data points that will best allow you to perceive the Father's will. And if you want to increase your prospects of finishing this quest, you must position yourself to always receive the most complete picture of the Father's will. Your battles with complacency. Now, it goes without saying that obtaining a complete picture of the Father's will is a critical factor in your victory over complacency. If you recall, there are two primary drivers of complacency: enter, refusal, and neglect. By and large, refusal is easily defeated by compliance, for it is impossible to comply to the Father's will and at the same time refuse to do his will. And yet, neglect, being more subtle, could persist if you're not careful. and if you're not growing in the Spirit. If you are, transformation will eventually find him out because you will always have the most complete picture of the Father's will. Ergo, you will easily defeat the spirit of neglect. For where there is transformation, there can be no neglect. Notwithstanding, this doesn't mean there will be no byproducts of neglect for you to deal with. Quite the contrary. The greatest challenge in your pursuit of transformation is, in fact, a derivative of neglect. Enter procrastination. In this scenario, you know the Father's will, and you wholly intend to do his will. And yet, you do not have the urgency concerning the matters of his will. Here lies the inflection and the problem. And it is such an immense issue that I will offer it as an inflection point. And this is one I advise you to bookmark if you are led. The most critical factor concerning the Father's will is, more often than not, the time. It's understanding when the Father's will should materialize in your life. Now, to our good fortune, this time factor will always reveal itself via transformation. Now, let me tell you something. Even if you don't know the specific timing concerning the Father's will, you don't need to worry because you will always have a general framework. And this framework will always expose the residual defects of complacency, all of which will be eliminated via the transformation process. Listen to me. If you trust and follow this process, you will be free of complacency. What is more, for the first time in your life, your thought dimension will be wholly aligned with the full desire of Elohim. Here is how. Whereas complacency works to maintain the default landscape of our minds, transformation changes our minds by purging our thought dimension of anything contrary to the Father's will, so that we are wholly aligned with every factor of his will. And this, my friends, is the key to unlocking the power of obedience and the full effect of faith. This is the great promise of transformation. This is the reason why Yahuwah led me to create this podcast ministry. And this is the reason why you are all here. Now, here is the final word. When it comes to transformation, you will never grow if you follow the status quo. Brothers and sisters, that should be a given. And yet, so many within the extended nation of Israel are to some degree resistant to change. To wit, they claim to believe in transformation, and yet they don't want to be transformed. They don't want to change. And the primary reason why is because they don't want to be obedient in all things. They don't want to conform to the standard of truth by which we are being transformed. And seeing as this is the primary path that leads to the dying nation of Israel, I recommend that you embrace change. Don't resist, for our salvation is established upon transformation. And by transformation, we persist. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on the word you have heard today. And as always, ask the Father to reveal the truth to you. For the children of Elohim live by conviction. And if he has not convicted you, or if you had not heard him concerning these matters, you should pray until you do. Today, I want you to meditate on the word I have shared. There are many crucial matters we covered, and so that is the only assignment for today. Consider these matters and be watchful as you pray. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 385, Your Victory Over Complacency, Part 2. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 390, The Importance of Reigning Over Disobedience. I will post this podcast on Wednesday, December 18th, 2024. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch, continue to pray, continue in fasting, and most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.